Okay, well, welcome everybody in the present, in the future. Welcome to the Opera Queens podcast. As you can see from both our green screens, we're both representing today, which is super, super exciting. My name is Mike Fan Zuming. I use they pronouns, and I'm the artistic director of Opera Queens. And before I introduce what this is, I'm just going to do a little land acknowledgement. And one of my Indigenous mentors suggested never to do a land acknowledgement with a script. And it should come from the heart. And I want to gratefully acknowledge that I am on the beautiful land of Toronto or Takaronto, the land of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. And Opera Queens also, we work and are grateful to work and play and create on the land of Montreal or Chichoge, the land of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, and the land that Jay is on in Quebec. And so we are super grateful to be here and to have an opera company that seeks to have more social justice for IBPOC communities and especially our Indigenous folks out there, and Two-Spirit folks in particular, from the queer perspective. So the Opera Queens podcast. So in case you didn't know, this is episode 3 of our very first season, 2021 to 2022 season, and our mission here is to spotlight the queer and IBPOC performers that we've had this season performing and creating, composing as well too, and in all sorts of different facets, and to really talk about queer identity, BIPOC identity, IBPOC identity, immigrant identity, all of the kind of marginalized groups that seek and need more representation in opera and in classical music, and have conversations that go beyond the stage, because of course we love performing this repertoire, it's great to present it, but there's a lot that needs to be said that we don't always have the opportunity to on stage. And if I don't continue tripping over my words, then hopefully it'll be an eloquent, insightful conversation. But today, our third guest, we're super excited to welcome Dr. J Marchand Knight. And I'd love to throw that out. It was hard won, so gotta represent. And we'll talk about Jay today and their amazing work. And also want to acknowledge that we're super grateful this first season to receive support from Canada Council for the Arts, Conseil des Arts du Canada, as you can see in this corner of the green screen, who are really showing that they're really putting the value behind groups like ours that are IBPOC, that are queer. And it means a lot, and we're really grateful for their support. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to introduce our amazing guest. Hopefully you already know them, but if not, I will share it and share some things. It's probably already out of date because Jay's very in demand these days, and there are already so many other projects and things that are happening, I'm sure. But just a little bit of a synopsis and a beautiful headshot, I have to say, very colorful, very Opera Queens. So J Marchand Knight is a treble Zwischenfach operatic singer, composer, and researcher defying Fach. Jay possesses a virtuosic 3-octave plus range, it is true, from, inside joke, baritone to high coloratura soprano. Jay has portrayed a vast majority of operatic roles, which is increased this season with Opera Queens, but it's included Semele, Belinda, Violetta, Hannah Glavari, Tremenisha, and Angelina Ali. Among many performances include numerous Montreal performances where they're based, as well as Rome, Salzburg, and Carnegie Hall. Among numerous composed operas and those in development, their most recent, which was amazing, is Mixed Messages, No Pants, about the COVID-19 pandemic experience for performers and academics alike, along with Katrine Amsler and the Clark Concordia Laptop Orchestra. Jay has completed a 2.5-year research internship at McGill University with Professor Stephen McAdams on the Actor Project, which applies timbral perception research to orchestration. They hold an ACS in audio recording technology, a master's degree in opera performance, and a doctorate of musical arts and vocal pedagogy, which is where the doctor comes from. In 2021, research interests include gender semiotics, perception, and vocal timbre. the applications of singing lessons as part of larger voice rehabilitation programs, and equity and accessibility in music performance. Passionate about EDI, Jay was a 2019 recipient of McGill's Award for Equity and Community Building for their work with McGill's Subcommittee on Queer People and with the Schulich School of Music's Accessibility Initiatives. Jay is currently completing a second doctorate, this time a PhD at Concordia, in the Individualized Program in Pure Science, also known as INDI, under the supervision of Professor Michael Desroches. And I just want to mention with Opera Queens this season, Jay performed the roles of DJ, aka Don José in Bizet's Carmen, and the title role of Agrippina by Händel, and as well contributed to our text message chorus for Serpas, These Wings Are Meant to Fly. And we had the opportunity to present them live, mostly in Montreal and a little bit on Zoom. And we also filmed it, which will be released, we're hoping now, in 2022. And so it's been a very exciting year with Opera Queens, and especially with Jay, who contributed a lot to some really amazing but also very challenging repertoire, which ultimately proved very rewarding. All right, so we have a clip from Jay singing DJ, or Don José from Carmen, and this was from Kin Experience in Montreal, and pianist Ben Kwong and Tam Lan Truong was filming, and I had the pleasure of playing Carmen opposite DJ, although as you'll see I leave just before this starts, so I'm not in the scene. Okay, finally, let's take it away, Jay. Hopefully it will work finally. Yay. Yay, gorgeous. Beautiful to watch that clip. It makes me feel very nostalgic for my performance, for Carmen. Hopefully it's something we get to do again, but yeah, really, really, really beautiful and beautiful performance as always. So welcome, Jay. Great to see you. How are you doing today? How are you feeling?
Oh, well, I'm okay. Just finished the semester. Last paper, last exam on Tuesday, and now full on Christmas rush, trying to get everything ready for the kids.
Absolutely. So busy time as usual. As we can see, you have many different interests. You are involved in many different things, but it definitely can be a lot too. It definitely can relate. So it's very exciting. Yeah. So, but congratulations. So I'm glad that a lot of that is wrapped up, and hopefully you have some time to enjoy a little bit before the new year hits. So especially because we just watched this clip of you performing our DJ in Carmen. So I would love to know what you thought about this character. If you could talk a little bit about your, performing this, which was kind of different for you, and I guess yeah, your thoughts of playing something that you don't usually get to play in the traditional opera space.
Yeah, that's a really great question because I did see, that one of the things that was talked about was the sort of limpid soprano, the mimis and the even the barbarinas who are a bit feistier, but still very much kind of there's the barbarina types and there's the mimi types, and that's kind of all I've really had um, most of what I've had my hand in, in playing. And but when I thought about this role, the thing that was really difficult was kind of trying to understand how I was going to play um, a character that is so tied up with like domestic violence, and I found that really hard to sit with in the beginning, because these characters like Don Giovanni and Don Jose are the characters that we usually play against, right? So we deal with it from, like sopranos and mezzos. We are dealing with characters like Don Giovanni and Don Jose from the other side. We don't usually have to think about what it feels like to play the character doing the killing or whatever it is, and so that was very new and very I wasn't sure in the beginning that I was gonna be able to be convincing in the part at all, that I would know how to do that, because I've just never considered those characters. I actually talked to a friend who's done a bunch of Don Giovanni's about like how do you do that, how do you play these roles, and how do you find the humanity in these characters, and how do you make them three-dimensional, four-dimensional, not just flat like I am bad murdering guy, like, because there has to, otherwise what's the point? There has to be an arc and a conflict, an inner conflict, and an emotion even in those characters, or else it's boring. So yeah, it was a lot. And at the same time, of course, I was doing a research project on men, and the literary form and genre that it comes from. So all the while trying to bring humanity to this character, I was well aware, as many people I think aren't, that Don Jose and Carmen were actually not written as human characters. They were written as representations of cultural groups. And so it was kind of a strange thing to be thinking about so heavily at the same time as I was preparing a role and trying to bring humanity to this ugly character. Yeah, it was weird, but great. Like really, really good for my brain, you know?
I'm glad. I'm glad. And that is like the tagline we should put everywhere for Opera Queens. Weird but great is our goal. Because yeah, it's so interesting, and I know definitely we had talked a lot about this, but really the whole thing with his character is very fascinating too, because of course the music is very beautiful, the character isn't, but the fact that it is written that way is very telling as well too about the perspective, which is one thing. But I have to say your performance of it was so wonderful, and I think for me, I think a lot for Don Jose, we think a lot about the murder and this kind of psychopathic character, but I think what you really leaned into it, which made it effective, was really your passion, and that really read through. And but I think the whole thing with why we wanted to do this is that for me, playing female identifying roles actually unlocks a lot of more, I guess, me, because I think I see myself a lot less in kind of the male tropes of opera. But then again, sometimes this happens with you where this wasn't actually something you thought you'd sing, but actually vocally it fit well, and actually it still allowed you to explore different sides. And I think that's the great gift of being an actor performer, is that you get to play different characters. The only problem is with opera, it's just so trope. There's so many tropes, and there's such a limited capacity based on voice type. Whereas if we think of someone like Meryl Streep, someone in theater and film, they can really play any character, and there's not really kind of as much of a limit. But with us, there's such a, and it doesn't have to be that way, but oftentimes it is. So I'm glad that it allowed you to kind of explore a little bit and dive in. But it also kind of shows what we're trying to do is to kind of break open the boundaries a little bit, because you have such, for example, varying dramatic gifts and different kind of insights, and being kind of trapped into just one kind of heroine or one kind of character is very limiting and not as interesting. And having this chance to see you play this character was so interesting. And for you, even though it was a challenge, it kind of at least hopefully gave you a little bit more possibilities, rather than feeling like, okay, here's the box, and so it's just interesting to hear your thoughts about that. It was challenging, and but yeah, it was very interesting. It all kind of tied together. So the Don Jose, the Carmen, was part of our Latin Night production, and so we paired it with a piece about the Pulse tragedy in Orlando, which was kind of the intention to kind of tie it together with Latinx, Hispanics identity, and kind of representation, the racialization that the groups kind of face, and the tropes that also come with this repertoire too. You were mentioning that you were also researching Carmen and exploring that too. So I'd love to hear your thoughts just on this opera, on this piece, because you really got multiple sides of the coin, because you're working on it from an academic standpoint, and then you're working on it from a performance standpoint. So so I would, especially for us, with Opera Queens, talking about gender, sexuality, racialization, how that kind of comes into how you see this piece, or how it's kind of grown.
Yeah, Carmen is really juicy and really layered. And the character of Carmen is strange, because what's often pointed out is that all of her music is based on popular forms. So she doesn't have any of the kind of newly composed Verismo style emotional stuff that Don Jose has, like the aria we just heard. Her stuff is all mishmash, really, of folk forms and dance forms from different cultures. So that kind of points to Bizet's Orientalism, because the music isn't even from the right country. It's just like, well, this is kind of Hispanic-y music. Let's just put it all
exotic, generically exotic.
Right. It doesn't matter that if it's Cuban. It doesn't matter if it's Mexican. It doesn't. We're just gonna throw it together because Carmen. But meanwhile, Carmen is supposed to be a Roma gypsy, right? And gypsy, of course, is not a happy word to use, but in all of the in all of the literature, I mean, that's kind of the point of this whole thing, is that Don José is this Basque Hidalgo character. Hidalgo meaning kind of a noble person who is from an old noble family, but they've lost all their money. And Basque people being sort of not on the level of the real Spanish people, and the Roma Gypsy people being, you know, beneath the Basque people, and then the French narrator in the novel being at the top, even above Camille. So the French narrator in the original novel finds Carmen attractive as well, but resists her, which is what places him above everybody. Escamillo is Spanish, and he's okay, but he doesn't resist. Don José is super tragic, and then Carmen, you know, has to be killed for just being who she is. So that's how that hierarchical stuff works in the book, and it's really disturbing and distressing. So there's that to think about. These travel journals were actually a very common literary form at the time, and they were used to basically desensitize the people back home about the people that were being colonized. So they would write these sort of supposedly half fictions or even diaries, but a lot of it was completely made up. So these are where these stories of, you know, women in Africa having babies in the fields while they were working, and just like catching the baby in one hand and continuing to work with the other one, and how they felt no pain, and all of those myths originate in these travel journals, which were then brought back to Europe. And the European people would read them and eat them up like they were soap operas and tabloids like we do today. And then they thought, oh, well, it's perfectly okay to, you know, colonize these people and try to like help them and educate them because, you know, look what's going on over there. And Carmen was one of those. So there's that. But then we also have on the surface this story about domestic violence. So some people really view Carmen, the character, as sort of almost a victim in this opera. Other people view her as sort of like iconic feminist character because she's like, you know, free I am born and free I will die. Like you cannot control me. You will not control me. I would rather die than be controlled. So there's a lot going on and a lot to think about. And then, of course, we have the casting problems that have happened, right? Like, why is Leontine Price, a soprano, singing Carmen? Why is Vittorio de Los Angeles, a soprano, singing Carmen? Why, you know, it's such a strange, racialized role. One of the few mezzo roles that is sung by all kinds of voice types, because really it's almost like you gotta look like a Carmen to play a Carmen. And it's these roles both open doors for people of color, but also kind of box us in to certain character types, evil character types, right? Because Carmen causes Don José's downfall. And they also cause us to have to sing against Fach sometimes, which can be great, but can also be harmful if it pushes the voice in a direction that it's not fit to go in. You know, Ursula, of course, in Ballo is the biggest of these racialized roles. It got a Black person on stage at the Met, but as the evil, like, voodoo
fortune teller.
Exactly. So yeah, there's just a lot to consider, and I really feel like it's great to perform these pieces. But people should be thinking about all of these issues when they perform them. They shouldn't just you know, do another Carmen or do another Don Giovanni or do another Ballo without kind
Mhm.
of learning about some of these things that it brings up.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why we're so happy and excited, especially today, for you to be here to talk about it, to peel back the curtain a little bit, and something that we wish we would talk about because oftentimes when we go to pre-opera talks or things like that, those aren't the things that companies are talking about and that people are thinking about, and also challenging kind of those expectations. And I hope, especially, I think in our live presentations, for example, but especially in our film production where we have more of the opera, it's abridged, but it still has more of the arias and numbers than we presented live. That people are thinking about it and asking themselves, why, when I watch this opera, why don't I question that more often, or why is it always done this way? And I really love that point you brought up as well too, because for example, I know for me as um, being Asian, I haven't seen so many Asian Carmens. There's certainly many amazing Asian mezzos out there, but it's a role that But I've seen plenty of Asian Suzukis, so it really makes you wonder, are they really as open, or is the industry casting it as openly as it should? Is a really interesting point to consider and to kind of. I mean, I'm not sure if if they're not from that community, if they even realize that's going on, or if they just turn a blind eye, or kind of a combination of both.
Well, it's a dilemma too because when we think about these roles like Butterfly
Mm.
or Carmen,
Aida. Yeah.
Aida, right?
Mm.
Um, should we be saving those parts for the singers of color to play?
Yeah.
Should we be or should we be like suspending our disbelief and allowing everybody to sing these roles? I would say yes,
Mm.
if we were fairly casting all the other parts, right? So
Yes.
we have, how many Asian Violettas are we casting? How many
Mm.
Black Violettas are we casting? When
Exactly.
we are casting the same number of Asian and Black Violettas as white Violettas,
Yeah.
then we don't have to reserve Butterfly for the Asian soprano. But
Exactly.
right now, it's just the casting is not done, with this colorblind ideal in all the other roles. Which, I mean,
Exactly.
there's nothing in the script that says this opera is not going to work if Violetta is black or Asian.
Mm. Mm.
Um, Angelina Ali is a different story
Mm.
because um, it's it's a true story and this is a real person. However, we still have the problem of when it comes time to workshop these operas and whatnot. Because I was in a workshopped version, um, you have to use the people that you have available to you. And
Yeah.
at the time in the program I was in, there was no black tenor, um, and we ended
Tradition
up.
in itself, of yeah.
Um, they should they have gone looking for one before they workshopped the opera. I don't have an answer for that. I wasn't in charge.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, but it's a
you know,
question of also, then also in academic programs and opera houses, the representation being needed, behind the scenes and in on stage as well too, in workshops, and having that diversity and representation to begin with. Because I know for myself too, I've been one of the few Asian people in the program, and it's a real numbers game that we really see. And at the same time, there are many singers with merit, and people get into this whole discussion of whether their merit is worth it and everything like that. But the fact is that they are out there, but it definitely needs to change, and people's perceptions need to change about what people are capable of. Yeah, because it is a very disturbing trend where I see certain singers singing at big opera houses, and especially for Asian sopranos, we see them cast in a ton of butterflies or even aidas and not many other things, and they're singing all these other roles everywhere else or in their native countries. Um, and in Western countries, not so much the same and the same kind of breadth and openness. So we're hoping we can shake up the box, and I think even you were pleasantly surprised how well, for example, Don Jose was a role that fit for you. But there's so many more possibilities that I think exist that are possible that people are not considering.
Absolutely. When I was younger, I sang a lot of color tour rep, not on stage, but in the studio.
Well, I wonder why also.
Um, and on stage, I was cast in a very different type of
Mhm.
role than what I was singing in my lessons, which is, it's always been a very weird thing about my trajectory. Is like, how come I'm, learning the doll song in my lesson, and then I go to audition and get put in a scene singing Vanessa. you know? And so either there was something very funky about my voice, which is sort of how I always felt. And it turns out, we'll get back to talking about what a Zwischenfach is later.
Yeah, yeah.
So it turns out, yes, okay, sure. But also in retrospect, maybe there was a reason why I was um, also kind of stereotyped into a different kind of role. And it's really tough to separate the two things, because I would walk in and I would sing and people would say things like, oh wow, so you're a black soprano and you sound like a mezzo? And I was like, do you think I sound like a mezzo because of how I look though? Or, so I never owned or knew or had a clear picture of what my voice was
Hmm.
um, for a long time, because I was kind of pushed in all these weird directions. And often, I saw it happen in school where they wanted to cast this black mezzo as Tituba. And when she said, do you want to only cast me as that because I'm black? They were like, listen, if you don't want to do it, we have this other black person that we're going to cast as it. And that other black person was a soprano.
Hmm.
So they really were just looking to cast any black person in the school as Tituba. It had nothing to do with the level they were in at school, because the student was like, I'm an undergrad and you never cast undergrad in these
Right.
roles. I think you are only casting me because I'm black, and you're not even considering whether I'm ready vocally to sing the part.
If it suits
Um,
them even, yeah.
if it suits
Vocally,
me,
yeah.
anything like that. So it was kind of a controversial thing that happened when I was in school, and I hope I'm not out of line for bringing it up. Um, no names,
Yeah.
but I just feel like that kind of stuff happens, and it leads to um, for me anyways, it led to a sort of slower.
Mm.
I didn't settle into my voice comfortably for a long time, because I didn't really understand what my voice was. And
Mm.
maybe that's because of what my voice is, but maybe that's also because of how I was perceived by the people training and guiding my career. It's kind of hard to say, and not I'm not trying to live in the past though, so
Mhm. Yeah, and absolutely, it's probably some kind of combination of both. But yeah, I'm really grateful that you are having the courage and the openness to talk about that. And this is a space where we want those conversations to happen. I think in the pandemic, there's been some issues of social justice that has really come to the forefront with George Floyd, with things happening in the Asian diaspora community as well, where I think it's really inevitable that these things that we've been hiding and sitting on for years are finally coming out, and more importantly, other people are listening, and which is not something that hasn't already happened. But I always like to preface and to mention that obviously our guests are being very vulnerable and courageous to share these things, and because it's still an industry where people think about the pushback, and oh, will this affect my career, etc. And obviously we don't want to finger point and say names, but I think it's still important to talk about. And I'm grateful when people are willing enough to talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, if we don't share these experiences, people don't know they happen. If they don't have that lived experience, people don't always have the empathy or the imagination or the realization that these things happen, that they're not okay, that we need to create a new path forward, and we need to work to address it, because it still happens in 2021. People are surprised, but after all this, even it's still happening. It will happen
Oh,
because
yeah.
it's part of human nature. But it needs to be called out for sure. So I'm glad you are, and that we have an opportunity just to kind of, yeah, just to bring it to light.
Yeah.
And for people like us that need that representation, that need that kind of, because for me, hearing about it, I know I definitely resonate with it, and I'm hoping that other people will, especially young singers who are going through those things, and to kind of trust their compass, because there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and adding race and all of that is another thing. Something that you also kind of brought in was also body type and body image and all of that visually. How do certain characters look, or how have they been perceived over time? And like the doll Olympia from Tales of Hoffman is a really great example, because it's there. She's the doll. That's all that's written in automat. But but over the years, how it's been cast is often a tall white woman, and that's one option. But there's lots of others that can sing the doll song. But it's very fascinating to see that that's how things develop over time.
I auditioned for the doll once and was straight up told after the audition that I sang a great doll, but I was too fat for the part.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, too curvy, which we was a euphemism, but I thought it was you know um really upsetting to hear at 19 years old or something.
Mm,
And I was considerably thinner then,
mm,
but still too curvy for what they wanted for the doll. And I was quite disappointed,
mm,
but I it was a learning experience,
mm,
um, and I continued singing the aria
mm,
everywhere I went, because every time there was a gala,
mm,
uh, I was either asked to sing the doll, Queen of the Night, or Glitter and Be Gay.
mm.
But I never sang a single coloratura role in full, all at once. So I've done all of Zerbinetta, but in chunks.
Mm,
Um, and I never got cast in those parts, not even in the scenes.
mm,
We actually did the doll scene in Miami many years later,
mm.
and it was really cool the way they did it. They actually cast a sort of little cute red haired girl and a Japanese girl, and they changed the doll for each performance. So the red haired doll was dressed as a Barbie,
Oh
and
wow.
Japanese girl brought in some kind of traditional clothing for a Japanese doll, and they changed
Wow.
the movements and everything. So the Barbie one had those arms that
Right.
like this, and the Japanese woman took care of all of her own movements and choreography. And it was really nice to
Wow.
go on
Yes.
the opposite evenings and see how they changed everything to kind of represent um, the culture of those dolls countries, because it was like
Mm.
an American doll and a Japanese doll. It was very cool.
That is cool. It's something
Yeah.
we should see more often, and it really brings more of that creativity, which is what we want to see. And we hope that people will be more, inspired, companies or singers as well, to kind of be more imaginative with casting, with roles, with new works as well too, because there's so many more possibilities. And I think once people open their eyes, if they're not quite yet, there's so much more richness out there available. It makes it so much more interesting, and we get these moments, as you had mentioned, where we get so much more personality and more individuality showing, and that's really what art, I think, should be, so much more individual and personal. And yeah, and I think it's really beautiful what you're talking about with the racialized roles, for example, which is definitely something we wanted to discuss. So definitely an issue.
Yeah.
Something interesting, though, that you mentioned with your voice type is that a lot of people might be cast against what they should be singing, naturally, because of their look, their race, their gender, their size, etc. And guided into, a voice type or a fa or roles that are not necessarily suited to them vocally. But the thing with you, which is really fascinating, is that you actually can really pretty much do it all because you are this varied, at least currently. Perhaps it was not always that way, but I think there was always that kind of possibility of being what we call a Zwischenfach in opera, which is a voice that can sing beyond just a limited Fach, a very wide range, and comfort in a lot of different ranges, low and high and middle, that is not always present in most voices, which is a very kind of unique voice, and it's been very exciting to work with because there's so much interesting repertoire that you're able to sing. But at the same time, it was confusing because it makes you harder to fit in that box, which, I mean, why should the box begin with anyway? But I wonder if you could talk about your Zwischenfach journey, and yeah, it's very fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great topic. So even today, in like discussion groups on Facebook, I was advised, sort of in a just a conversation. So an unofficial way, kind of advised against marketing myself as a Zwischenfach. I will say that I don't really market myself at all. I'm not really on that train at the moment. But it just sort of happened, and there's not really much way to get around it. It's just like there's no denying it, and I don't really understand why it's something that should be denied. And it was very cute because the person who was giving the advice sort of said, "Oh, don't worry, your voice will settle, and when you get a little older." How old are you?
Oh, it's settled. It just settled everywhere. That's cute, though.
I said, "Oh, I'm 45," and they said, "Oh, never mind. Then you are what you are." And so the truth is that going back to my undergrad, they had decided that we were going to do Marriage of Figaro, and it was going to be the early music opera. And my teacher at the time, I was one of the few sopranos who was in the early music degree, but also taking the opera class. She strongly advised me to audition for Susanna, and said, you're probably going to get that part because it's going to be the early music opera. So go for it. And then when I did the audition, they decided to switch it to the main stage opera, and I wound up getting cast as Barbarina. And I was kind of disappointed, but they said that in the audition, my voice was darker than the people they were considering for Countess. And they said if it had turned out to be the early music opera, they may have changed their minds and cast me as Countess. But because it was going to be the main stage and done with a modern orchestra, and I was still an undergrad, they didn't think that I had the heft at that point to cut through the kind of modern orchestra in the way they wanted. Plus, it opened up the possibility of casting people from the regular program. So it was really visually cast as well, and it ended up looking really, really cute because the Countess was about 6 feet tall, and the Susan was like 5'7", and I was 5'3". So it was like boom, 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 and it was super cute. And I actually ended up having the opportunity to sing Barbarina to Julie Boulian's Bambino. So it was just like, it was great. What a great production. But they did say to me, here's the thing, we're going to cast you as Barbarina. It really doesn't matter what voice type sings that part. So we are able to put aside our disagreements about what your voice type is, because like nobody knows. And we're just going to give you the role that can be sung by mezzos and by sopranos. So, and be happy because you're getting a main stage part as an undergrad. So, no complaints about that, but it was kind of very telling that even as an this starting, by the time I got to my master's, they took Queen of the Night away from me and replaced it with Traviata. And which I think was on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
But the same kind of issues continued to come up. So I left Montreal in 2005, right when that transition was happening, and started over with auditioning with, my old repertoire of Glitter and Begay and some Purcell and Semele, and Baby Doe and these kinds of things that I was singing kind of at the end of my undergrad, beginning of my master's. And so the whole confusion started again, where I would go in to audition for the main stage opera and sing Una voce poco fa with an interpolated high F, and then get cast, like I said, in scenes as Donna Elvira and Vanessa. And by the time I worked up to main stage roles in my doctorate, I ended up singing Belinda and Hannah Glavari in Merry Widow, which is often sung by mezzos.
Yeah.
So again, all over the place. And now it's really fun. So that joke about the baritone to coloratura, of course I am not a baritone. It's true, and people don't realize that the range of the lowest bass and the highest soprano do overlap. Yes, I sing. I do notes in the baritone and bass range. It does not a bass make me. I do have the heft and the color to be able to sing some mezzo stuff for sure. At my master's recital, I actually sang Songs of a Fairy Tale Princess, which is typically done by coloraturas, but I also sang a Prokofiev Ugly Duckling, which is usually sung by mezzos and contraltos.
Exactly.
So I just think of myself as lucky. And if it means, people are confused and I don't always get the parts I want, I lose roles because they couldn't decide if I was a countess or a Susanna, so I didn't get anything, or I get Barbarina. It's not the end of the world, I'm still singing, and it's not really, I've never really been that concerned about what other people think of me, because I have too much to do to be worried about that, and I can't change how I sing, really, and I don't want to.
Yeah, and I think you're really at a point we really see now where you're just really, yourself and you love it and you go forth. And as we see, you're really very much in demand right now, exactly as who you are. And I think just being true to that, and I think it makes it difficult at the beginning when you have those voices pulling you in all sorts of directions or making you pick, but in the end, you know yourself the best. I think everybody needs to honor that part of themselves, whether it's voice type, sexuality, etc. But I think it's a really interesting metaphor for all of that, because I think
It's
we're all
true.
dealing with that kind of sense of authenticity and identity, right? In one
Yeah.
form or another. But yeah, it's really interesting, and now it's kind of a matter of finding spaces where you get to do what you want. And so, for example, Onegin, I was thinking, well, you always joke how you want to be a baritone, and we were thinking maybe Onegin, but then actually we're really interested to think about nurse, which we also thought would be a really interesting role for you as a contralto role. It's something you could
Yeah.
also sing very comfortably, And I mean, really any role, but now you get to really experiment and play with things that you really want to do, and
Yeah.
hopefully we're creating and finding those spaces where it's possible, because there's still a lot of spaces which are very locked and tight, but hopefully we're getting more open, because voice is not like a violin or a piano where it's, the notes are there on the instrument. A human voice is not something that is so easily um, boxed in. It's very individual, like a thumbprint.
Yeah, it is tough. Like I was cast in a soprano role that was supposed to be performed in March, and unfortunately it's been canceled because of COVID. But it was very funny to go back to a young role, where I was playing a daughter and singing sometimes in the top line of the quintet, and all this stuff, because I have been doing a lot of bottom lines recently and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. Um, and being told a lot of the time that I needed to balance the rest of the ensemble better, that it was too loud or too dark, too prominent, and understanding that there are sopranos who have big, heavy, prominent voices. There are dramatic sopranos in the world. So number one, you can still be a soprano and have like a big honking voice. So to be
and
told,
a dark voice,
and a dark voice. So to be told, first of all, that you and this isn't what my experience was, but I have been told, that color doesn't go with soprano. Not true.
Exactly.
Sorry. Second, then to be cast in these parts and then have people say, well, maybe you should have been, singing the other part or the alto part or whatever. It's still happening to me. So, and I'm actually really excited to sing like a proper contralto part. And probably will do more of that in the future, just from the reaction of sort of the people that I've been auditioning for. Part of me thinks it's a function of age, right? Because at 45, there are 20-year-olds out there who can sing floaty soprano parts, but they can't necessarily sing or the beefy or lower roles. And so it does start to happen as you get older. By the time I was about 30 years old, I started to be asked to sing alto parts and things to support undergrads who were cast in a scene, but they needed someone to sing the alto part and they didn't have an alto. So that is kind of another sort of way in for sopranos to explore that repertoire. Or another unfortunate way that sopranos might get pushed into or alto rep because you're getting older. And so, you look like Agrippina, you don't look like Popea anymore. But if it's wrong for you vocally, don't do it. Don't let them push you around. If it's right for you vocally and you want to do it, hey, it's great. Because what I never realized is that I'm not a horrible actor.
Because you never really had a lot of chance to show it in a lot of that, stereotype repertoire that you were casting. Yeah.
There I was, singing the doll song, and someone comes up and says, "Well, you're really wooden on stage," and I was like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like these roles are very wooden. Like
there's not so much to work with here.
Queen of the Night. The director literally told me, okay, now you just stand still and like point and yell at the audience because we're not going to have you walking all over the place while you're trying to sing a high F. So how was I supposed to show that I could be a good actor when I was singing the doll and Queen of the Night, maybe I didn't feel like a good actor because I was never given a role like Agrippina, which was so much fun.
Absolutely. And fortunately for you, it's comfortable and something that you can do well. But yeah, a lot of sopranos, especially higher colorature sopranos, their voice doesn't grow into something where they can sing more lyric repertoire or lower repertoire, and oftentimes they're pushed into it or they decide to do it and it doesn't work, but it's something that they're able to do with age. But there's a very limited repertoire the way that it's traditionally done with a canon. So that's why new work I think is also very important too, because I think these voice types can do so many other things just like a stage actor, but over the years they've started to be heard one way as this kind of character, as that kind of character. And it's just great to see the boundaries being broken for someone like you with the unique instrument that you have, being a great example to those of what the possibilities could be. I think is very exciting. I would love to talk as well on this Zwischenfach topic of how that relates to kind of gender and Fach as well too, because the Fachs end up getting very gendered as well too, with the soprano mezzo obviously being kind of very cis female oriented, tenor bass being cis male oriented, and with you, like both of us, we identify as non-binary as well, and I wonder if this Zwischenfach also allows you to kind of embrace that more as well too, and I think some companies and some groups are already talking about kind of doing away with some of the traditional Fox, which end up being very gendered and going more like treble, medium, low, and all of that. So just wondering how this kind of ties into this non-binary identity, I guess, also in terms of roles too. You know, roles also being very gendered in opera traditionally, also.
Yeah, that's a huge topic. So,
Juicy questions. We ask juicy questions here. Here to talk about it. Yeah.
yeah, I guess what I'm, interested in is so I haven't done too many pants roles. Sopranos, other than Oscar, right? There aren't too many pants roles out there for sopranos. So if you want to explore this sort of cross gender stuff or these non-binary, veiled non-binary type characters, you might want to look at the high mezzo rep, and it's all those cherubinos and idamantes, and then there's the Baroque stuff, the the Cesares and the Sestos. So I there's that, which has its own set of problems. Those pants roles are again tropes, right? These sort of teenage boy characters that aren't quite men, kind of becoming heroes or having like awakening sexualities, like Octavian. So it's a trope once again. So maybe not even that satisfying to play, because in a sense, and this is part of the trope, those characters are not real men yet, and that's why that's part of what that particular category of character is. It's like these boys that are not real men yet, and also still pure, which is why they have they're using the high voices, right? So they're not sort of the evil baritones. They're not the old basses. They're the young, pure, not quite men yet roles. And so is it that satisfying for people who want to explore cross-gender roles to sing a pants role? Not really, because it was very different than singing something like Don José, which is written differently, portrayed differently. That being said, would I sing pants roles? Oh, absolutely. The thing is, those roles are written for high voices already. Don José was not written for a soprano or mezzo voice. It was written for a tenor. So we did sing it or perform it up the octave in our version. So yeah, there's a lot that we can do, I think, to give people this experience. Much like Lucia Lucas said about playing Don Giovanni, I'm an actor, so the gender of my character on stage doesn't really matter, but it was nice to try playing something different, regardless of the gender. Because yes, the type of character in opera often is tied to the gender of the character. But But, regardless, if somebody said to me, like, here is a cis woman character, but they are a murderer, and we're going to assign you the role, it would have been quite different from singing something like Susanna or The Doll, right? So I tend to kind of view the world from a less gendered place anyways, and kind of go to the feelings of the character. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I don't know if that really answers the question very well. I felt like I got a bit rambly there, but
Oh, no worries. But a lot of it is really more just kind of an unlocking point, an opening place. It's a place I think hopefully that will stimulate more conversation, more discussion with others, things that maybe are not necessarily being talked about because a lot of people in our industry in classical music are kind of just taking it the way it is and not really questioning it. But there's a lot of things that exist that have become tradition that when we look at the broader world, are there not so many boxes and so many limits as one would think given the tradition of how it's been. Following kind of with the Zwischenfach metaphor, I guess, question, your career as well too is really interesting because also you are multi-talented and interested in many things and walk many different lines as a performer, researcher. You're a parent as well too. You're a teacher, and you're interested in all of that. You're embracing all of that, which of course makes for a busy life, but it's very full and rewarding at the same time. I can imagine as well too. So I'm wondering if that's been a kind of similar journey in terms of you're this, you're that, and kind of being made to choose. And how have you kind of embraced that in your career as well too? Because I think it's an interesting kind of parallel.
yeah, it's actually not always easy. I wish I could say, oh yeah, it's great. It's going super well. But I am often overscheduled and I have a weird schedule, right? Because so the students that I work with primarily are trans women who have day jobs. And so they take voice lessons from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m., which is when everybody else is finishing work and picking up their kids and doing family dinner and homework. And it's when I start teaching. So that makes things difficult. Then, of course, if I have rehearsals or performances, I'm out till 11, 12 o'clock at night. If there happens to be an event associated with the performance, then I might be at a reception till all hours. So that's tough to manage. And then, of course, with the academic work that I do, there's conferences, presentations, travel, and exams, papers to write, which takes up a lot of time and a lot of energy. You know, so it is tough to manage all of that. You cannot do it alone. I wish I could say, oh yeah, you can totally like have a baby and be an opera singer, or have a baby and be a really successful academic. You can, but you definitely need support. You definitely need childcare, and childcare that is available at strange times of day because we work in the evenings. So, you know, it's just you gotta figure that out, and you have to factor in the cost of all those things. And then with the career aspect of it, because yeah, I do have a lot of interests. I did an audio engineering degree. I've been, you know, singing opera. I play with, you know, electronic and popular music. I have some composition commissions floating around, and I'm interested in sort of the scientific kind of side of voice training. So that's how I ended up in the PhD program, is that I'm looking at sort of vocal perception and production in a psychology lab, and looking at voice timbre's relationship to gender perception. And so I felt like people in the beginning resisted the possibility that I could somehow link all of my interests in like equity and diversity in vocal performance, in science, into one thing, and electronics, because for me, electronic music, electroacoustic music is sort of the medium that I work in. So when I start thinking about writing roles for trans and non-binary characters, that is the medium that I think in. So that's how that ties in. And so it's I found a way, but it's been a lot of work just to link all those things, articulate the relationship, and get myself into a program where that would be accepted. And it's also hard sometimes not to kind of think that I need to fully devote myself to one of these paths to ever be successful. So right now I'm running into a problem with composition where I haven't written any new music in a while. I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking hard, but I've gone to my last couple of composition lessons and we've gone over old music, existing music. I haven't brought anything new to my teacher. And he's like, next lesson, I need some new music to work on. Like, it's great that you brought me these old scores. I want you to put them into Dorico and fix these mistakes. But be very clear that engraving time is separate from composition time. And I'm just like, oh God, like one more thing I have to do, really?
Right.
You know, I would love to be publishing 1 million articles, but it takes months to write one and go through the revision process. People keep sending me, oh, hey, you should apply for this grant. You know, I want to do all these things. And I'm trying really hard to maintain an acceptable level of practice in all these areas. But it's a lot of balls to keep in the air, and I just have had moments where I'm just sort of praying that I don't drop any. I'm at a point now where I really have to start being more selective too about what I accept, and I find that scary. A couple of years ago, 2 of my academic mentors sort of said to me, "It's time for you to start delegating, because some of the stuff that you have ideas about, they're great ideas, but you know, you could get sort of like an undergraduate mentee or assistant who could totally realize that idea. But this other thing is higher level, and you need to have your hands in that. You need to manage that." So starting to understand how that works, also starting to understand what the criteria, I guess, are for me to actually say yes to something. Someone was saying, you know, I forget what the three things are, but she said, yeah, and it had to meet 2 of them. So it was like, either you can make money from it, it's you love it, or it's like really good for career advancement. And it has to meet 2 for you to say yes. And so I don't know if that's necessarily the criteria for everyone, but for this person who's, you know, in a similar position, she was like, well, that's how I now make my decisions, because I just can't do all the things. And if I say yes to everything, then I'm not going to do a good job on any of them. So yeah, it's hard for those 2 reasons. One is that people don't think it makes sense in the beginning, and you have to work super hard to convince everyone that yes, you can be a singer and a composer and an audio engineer and a mom and this. And then next, you have to, like, if you're lucky and you're successful in one or all of those areas, eventually you have to figure out how to start eliminating the things that you really either can't do, or that aren't going to serve you, or that you know, either you won't serve them well or they won't serve you well. And that's a really hard lesson
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that because it's definitely an interesting journey. It's complicated and showing both your commitment to do that because it's easier just to drop it all and say I'm just not going to do it, and it's also difficult to kind of face that kind of criticism and kind of obstacles, but at the same time not sugarcoating it because I'm sure there's a lot of folks out there that are really interested in all of it, but it really does take a lot of commitment and it's not always easy, but it's a really great journey to be on and a very fortunate one to be on. So we're grateful to know you and have you as an opera queen because it really enriches us so much as well too.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there's so much to talk about. I think this is just a little bit of a little sampling, and I think hopefully it will start some other conversations too because that's kind of the real goal. I just wanted to move into our final closing clip,
Yeah.
which hopefully you can also share because I had issues with that at the beginning, and which hopefully no one will ever see again because we'll cut it out. But we're gonna move into a clip of you playing Agrippina. And this was the one night I got to play Popea, which was really great, and not sing about any of her music, which was much better for me. 'Cause it's not easy. And yeah, and Agrippina is, we kind of alluded to a little bit, a mother, a parent. She's a very interesting character, someone who is in this opera at least, and possibly in history, although we don't know her personally, but she's written as a schemer, trying to put her son on the throne, seductress, many different facets, and it was really interesting having you sing this role. I would love to talk about it more, but I'm sure that would be a whole other conversation in itself, which hopefully we'll be able to talk about one day. But we're gonna close with that. It's the Aria Nono Code, again from Kin Experience with Ben and Tam on piano and filming respectively. And in this version, you get to do a lot of fun things with my totally real hair. So I'm gonna close with this, and hopefully it will leave everyone a little bit of a comedic note because it's winter time, it's pandemic time, but hopefully we can at least put a smile on your face and remember that there is a reason to laugh. So
Yep.
uh,
Okay.
yeah. And hopefully it's not because of tech reasons, which certainly is laughable for a different reason.
Alrighty.
Let's do it. Yay! A real fun moment between the two of us, and it's great because I couldn't see you while we were doing it. You couldn't see me, and now we get to see what we're really doing on both ends. And it was really fun because we got to take out all of that lengthy russet and put in some campy dialogue. Yeah, it's a nice way to end. Definitely gave me some chuckles and just so much on point acting with all of the props. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jay, and sharing so much about your journey and being so open and honest and sharing such great insights. I'm sure it was definitely interesting for me. I hope it's interesting for everyone watching here today and also in the future later on. And yeah, we're recording this just before the winter holidays. So if you celebrate during this time, then I hope you have a great time and you enjoy. And you should celebrate anyway, no matter what time it is. And thank you so much for joining us. And we'll be back in January on, I'm just going to double check so I don't misquote. We've decided that Tuesday, January the 18th at 4 p.m. Eastern, we're going to return for our first podcast episode of the season, number 4, with Cesar Aguilar, who is a Mexican countertenor, now based in Toronto, Ontario. So we're super excited to talk to him. And if you remember episode 2, where we talked to Steven Serpa, Cesar interpreted a big role in his opera These Wings. So we're excited to kind of get his perspective. So hopefully you'll join us for that. And otherwise, big thanks to Jay. And we also would really appreciate if you consider donating to Opera Queens so we can continue putting on operas. We have some projects coming up, of course, and lots of ideas, as we mentioned. And it would be really helpful for you to support us and to keep queer IBPOC opera alive and thriving amidst lots of chaos. And otherwise, hope you will continue to enjoy our work, sustain it, and hope to see you live, but also online. And just keep the faith going and creating and being awesome. So thank you so much, Jay. Oh, I can't hear you, but I don't know if that's just. Oh, I think that's just me. Oh, there we go. Okay.
No, it was everybody.
Yay. Well, one more laugh to end things, of course. That's the classic way.
All I said was no, thank you.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm just gonna stop the recording, and then we're gonna have a little Zoom after party, which you won't get to see people in the future. But this is really great, and thank you so much again. And ciao for now, everyone. See you in 2022 in the new year.
Bye.